Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Browne here with you on this Thursday morning. Not a whole lot to talk about in the college football world. Everybody's joking about that. But, I mean, we know there's news. Ironically, in New England, Bill Belichick is going to part ways with Robert Kraft and the Patriots. And his close friend, another great one, Nick Saban. I don't know if you heard last night. Looks like he's retiring. From what, I don't know, because we're going to see him on TV. Like an Alabama friend of mine said, he'll be the one guy studying more tape than Tony Romo. That's what's going to happen. Look, we do it 6 times a week, 25 times a month, over 300 times a year. I say it every day. Repetition is the mother of all skill, okay? Want to be good at something, also bring on the best guest like Connor O'Gara, Saturday Down South. Journalism is alive and well, folks. There may not be newspapers delivered everywhere that you live, but you need to subscribe to the best. Connor's one of them. And, man, yesterday about, 2:30 or 3, I'm going outside to pick up the trash can on the side of the street, and my phone screen just exploded, and there was this news. And I went back to a conversation we had with Kevin Skarbinski on the show in late November. He's on a show every week with Wimp Sanderson in Tuscaloosa. He said, out of the blue, Wimp Sanderson said, what do you know about Nick Saban possibly stepping down after this year? And it's been out there, but did it surprise you that it came after he didn't win a national championship?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
And I wrote 2 weeks ago
Yeah.
that I thought Saban was not nearing retirement. I thought he had a few more years left. And I think we all have this ideal vision of what an all-time legend is going to look like when he steps down. And we think it's going to have this perfect Hollywood ending and that everything is going to be tied together. There will be no loose ends, no meat is left on the bone. And we'll be looking at this going, wow, that just felt right. And in reality, that just doesn't happen. It doesn't.
Right.
So this vision of Saban walking off, confetti falling on him, and he says, I'm done. I'm signing off for the final time. I didn't necessarily think that was a guarantee, but I will say I thought that in the adapt or die world of college football, he adapted as well as anyone. And to have gotten to the place that he did this year after the start that Alabama had, it was a reminder that, in my opinion, he still went out on top. He won 3 SEC titles in the 2020s decade. I mean, think about that. We're talking about is Kirby Smart and Georgia and the dynasty that they're building. And all Saban did was remind us that he's still very, very good at this. And the job that he did this year, that to me is fitting that he went out with arguably his best coaching job at Alabama.
Yeah, I said it a lot during the season. I think he'll look back at this was his favorite team because he coached harder than I think I've ever seen him coach to get this team as far as he did. And you look at it, and a lot of people are all excited about him leaving. Look, you want to be a good runner, swimmer, biker, anything you do, find the best people and train with them. Say what you want. You know where I graduated from. I'm an Auburn man, but you love to beat the best. And I don't like it when people get excited about a player being injured. I'll pray for you if you're that sick. But also when a coach is gone, I love to compete against the best. And people say, well, it's going to be easier. It ain't going to be easier. You think Alabama ain't going to go find somebody? I mean, competition is the spice of life. I love it.
I think it will be easier. I do.
Oh, no.
Maybe I'm in the minority with that.
No.
I think it's going to be easier, and not to say that it's going to be easy. It's still the SEC. It's still a 16-team league that right now, with adding Texas and Oklahoma, you think is going to be the best in all of college football, just because that's what it's been for the better part of 2 decades.
Yeah.
But I think knowing that Saban isn't the one standing in the way for everyone, it changes how we're going to view that path to an SEC championship, a national championship, and even for Kirby. Kirby went 1-5 against Saban. He went 1-5 against him. Yeah. And that to me is, and I looked at the post year 1 numbers for Kirby, and after year 1 at Georgia, the guy has 5 losses against Saban, 6 losses against everyone else. Kiffin never beat Saban. It was always the thing standing in the way, and the reason why Kiffin couldn't compete for an SEC championship. And TBD on whether or not Kiffin is the one who replaces Saban. I'm sure we'll get into all that. But you can't tell me that, even if it is a great coach that replaces Saban in Tuscaloosa, that it doesn't open up things for the rest of the SEC. And I agree with you. Look, he made this conference better. He made teams in the SEC shoot for the moon and end up in the stars, however that phrase goes. And I think that the conference as a whole benefited, despite the fact that for so much of it, it felt like it was Saban's world and everybody else was just living in it.
Yeah. Well, you go back to this, Nick Saban's retiring from football. What's next? We'll see him on TV. He's young, 72, but like some coach, Bill Belichick, these last few years have not been good, but it's ironic that those two within 24 hours are both stepping out of where they've been coaching. And you're right. There's been Jimbo Fisher beat him, Kirby beat him that one time. And there are very few people that have beaten Nick Saban. The names that are coming up, I've got my friend Matt Dean, who's a part of our show a couple of times a week. He'll be on in hour number 2. His son, Tyler, is the director of scouting at Oregon. And I talked with him last night. I'll let him, I'm not going to steal his thunder. He's going to talk about what they feel like Dan Lanning is going to do. He's pretty knowledgeable of the Oregon program. Lane Kiffin, that name will come up. But here's a wild card I'm going to throw out there because Franz Beard, GatorBaitMedia.com, called me yesterday. Jed Fish at Arizona. He used to coach quarterbacks at PK Yonge High School in Gainesville until Steve Spurrier made him a GA. He took let's call him Lazarus, what he did with Arizona football. Is that a possibility? I mean, look at his track record. He also coached with Belichick.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. I think Jed Fish is a fantastic coach, and I was like, there were certain things that I was kind of late on this year. Yeah. Arizona was not one of them. When Arizona started to turn things around, when they put Noah Fifita in as their starting quarterback, that was a different team. And if you watch them in the Alamo Bowl, a game in which they have to rally back to beat Oklahoma, you're seeing this team that did not have this 4-star, roster. And I say 4-star, not even 5-star, not even close to that. And they were 42nd to talent composite rankings. And the job that Jed Fish did to lead them to a 10-win season. I mean, my gosh, like that is a guy that appears to have things figured out. I would keep an eye on the Michigan opening if that's going to happen for him, given his ties to Michigan as well. But it does, I do wonder, and I threw out on my show on Saturday Down South podcast, the idea of like, what if they go with a wild card like a Mike Vrabel? And everybody's connecting Vrabel to Belichick and everything, but it wouldn't surprise me if there was some sort of Saban Belichick tie to this hire with how closely those two have been associated over the years. And if there's some sort of like, hey, Belichick has signed off on this guy, and even though he wasn't necessarily at Alabama, like he kind of gets it and he kind of understands this way. I'm fascinated to see this surge because I think it could go in a bunch of different directions.
Yeah, and you know who Jed Fish's roommate at Florida? He's a Florida grad. His roommate is the general manager of the Philadelphia Eagles. And all this was provided, I always give credit where it's due, from Franz Beard, who's a regular on our show, GatorBaitMedia.com. But that's one, 2 old Croats, that's what Belichick called him and Saban, 2 old Croatians. It's an unbelievable connection. And I think Alabama people, I watched all here at the house, we've got the Birmingham TV stations. We get all of them, even though we're living in Memphis. But, that's the marvel of technology. I watched all the local news out of Birmingham. There were people putting Alabama red and white shakers at the foot of his statue there in front of Bryant Denny and cases of Little Debbie oatmeal cream pies.
He's alive.
He's alive.
He's alive. I get it. We want to honor Saban. We want to honor the legacy and everything. And because he's on the other side of 70, it almost is treated like a death. It's the end of an era. It is the end of an era. I agree with you. I do think that we're going to continue to hear from Saban. Maybe he takes a year off and then gets back into it on the TV side. I think he'd have a great career in TV and potentially doing College Game Day if that's kind of the route that he took and replacing Corso if that's something that he talked about. John Talty wrote wrote about that in his book about Saban and the leadership principles and how that was almost a path for him at one point. And he thought about walking away from coaching. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him replace Corso. And McAfee provides the Corso, presence, so to speak.
Yeah.
And Saban would definitely add something to that desk. That would probably be my guess for what the next step is for him. Or, maybe he's just going to say, I'm going to live a quiet life. I'm going to go, be a grandparent. I'm going to go travel the world with Miss Terry. I'm going to go spend time in my $17.5 million home in Jupiter, Florida. I'm going to enjoy life because for so much of it, I have only been wired this way.
Well, Houston Nuts on our show sometimes, he said before the season, he goes, I'm going to get to go to a tailgate this year. He goes, I've never been to one in my life. I'm like, what? He's never been to one. And also want to go see his grandsons, go to a football game with his grandsons, a high school football game. And now got to ask you, you mentioned Pat McAfee. I watched his show that I don't know him at all. Maybe you do, but he's pretty neat. And we have, some of our guests, regulars on the show. My guys are in their early mid-20s. One of them's our intern, William Halliday at the Auburn Plainsman. He's a sophomore. He loves McAfee. And I've known his dad since kindergarten. I mean, he's just said they've got him on there to balance Lee Corso. But I think Pat McAfee really knows football. And what do you think about him? Just curious, because you're from Indiana and you're an Indiana grad. Wait, which town in Illinois are you from? Naperville?
Buffalo Grove.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, I've been fascinated by McAfee. Just as someone that I interned for the Colts briefly when I was in college. Spent a lot of time in that area. Wife is from Indianapolis. Grew up a diehard Colts fan and everything. It's like his transition into media has been one that I've followed for a while because it's really atypical to see someone that could have been consistently making millions of dollars to punt footballs. And then, in his late 20s, he decides he wants to retire and join Barstool. And that move was so heavily criticized. And to see this meteoric rise to where he's now at this place at ESPN where his spotlight has never been brighter. And so I think there are going to be things along the way where he has to figure it out. And it's not going to be politically correct. It will rub people the wrong way. If you're questioning, but like what I've always pushed back on, and I know a lot of people love David Pollock and like Georgia fans are not happy that McAfee is in this role because it's like, oh, he took David Pollock's spot on game day. I don't really think that was the case. I think McAfee provides so much more than that with what he does every single day to have a 3-hour show on live ESPN airwaves, which is not an easy thing to do at all. And so I think his passion is tremendous. I think there are going to be foot and mouth moments with him, and more so probably than your more buttoned up people on air. And that's the chance that ESPN is willing to take. But his career is fascinating. I don't think that he is someone that is just totally unprepared. But yeah, it's going to make ESPN so much more noteworthy in that space because he is part of it.
Well, I heard an interview with it was a podcast, and I cannot remember the guy's name, but he said what happens with ESPN a lot of times is once you take their money, they destroy you. That's what the guy said. And he said, I hope it doesn't happen to McAfee. And I agree with you. Free speech, the First Amendment is ardently and fervently revered on this show. Even, Roman Harper was on the show after the Tennessee-Missouri game, and he said, I'm not going to say this on SEC Network, but I'll say it on your show. That game plan Tennessee had against Missouri was horrible. But I think the SEC Network guys have a lot more leeway. But I think when you watch Pat McAfee, he seems like a genuinely decent guy. I mean, it's hard to find people from the Midwest that are not just plain and simple, but I think they need him and they need more like him. I'm glad to see it. Let's talk about Michigan. I watched the game at my friend TK's house over in Burnt Cane, Arkansas, at his hunting lodge. He is a Michigan grad from Birmingham, Michigan. And man, was he excited. And I had picked Michigan to win 34-28. It's like, I know Washington's got those receivers, but both lines of scrimmage. And I know a lot of people don't like Jim Harbaugh, but look at his dad, his mom and dad, his brother were there. I don't know. This guy's a hell of a coach. His players seem to love him, and they love each other, and they play their tails off. Am I wrong on Harbaugh? But what was your takeaway from Monday night?
It's pretty remarkable because this is the type of thing that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
and that's not even related to the Connor Stallions stuff and everything that goes on with that. But the 20th century power that builds and builds and builds and gets to this place the old fashioned way. Harbaugh won a title in year 9 at Michigan. And
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
first 5-6 years, it was, well, he can't beat Ohio State. This isn't going to work out. And they stuck with it. And they had this even the last 3 years to get to the semifinal, get smacked by Georgia, to get to the semifinal and feel like you're right there and you're that much closer, and then to still lose, and then to finally get over the hump this year. It just doesn't happen like that in college football. It happens like that in the NBA or something. It just doesn't happen like that. And so to see Harbaugh do it his way with a smash mouth team that became, not as he said, America's team, but public enemy number one, in my opinion. And even Big Ten fans were like, I don't want to see Michigan win. Like, I don't think they did it the right way. And it felt like if it was going to happen, it was always going to happen like this, with some controversy about Jim Harbaugh being overly competitive with the cheating scandal and all that. So, yeah, I mean, I thought Michigan would win as well. I didn't think Michigan would beat Alabama, so I thought Michigan would beat Washington.
Yeah.
But seeing the way that it played out, I mean, it felt like it was Michigan's year after they obviously got over the hump against Alabama.
And, Ohio State, Ryan Day, you look at his record in 5 years, and we know in 2018 he coached the first 3 games when Urban Meyer was out for those games. He's only lost 3 Big Ten games, and they've all been to Michigan in the last 3 years. And it almost is like Ohio State and the people that don't like Michigan are behind this cheating and these accusations, whatever. But when you talk to coaches, they'll tell you, we'll do anything to gain a competitive advantage. And it's almost like when Tiger Woods went through his problems, and everybody remembers those. I didn't see a bunch of golfers lining up with righteous indignation to criticize him because they're on the PGA Tour too, and I'll just leave it at that. A lot of crazy stuff happens. Jim Harbaugh takes his team, I've heard, to watch movies like We Were Soldiers with Mel Gibson. He's very, proud, invested in his Catholic faith. He wears goofy glasses. He tucks in his sweatshirts, and he wears white socks. So what? I saw that family, and you look at his mom and dad. I mean, I'm not buying that he's Darth Vader. He's not the evil one. I'm just not going to buy it.
No, but we need villains.
No, not from you, but I'm saying just a lot of people don't like him. I think you're right.
Well, it's interesting. I'm, as you can see the helmet right over there. I'm a Chicago Bears fan, and I'm hoping that the Bears are holding out on firing Matt Eberflus, so only if they can get Jim Harbaugh, and I'm hoping that that's going to be the approach. I mean, I would like them to fire Eberflus and get literally anybody else, but I was texting with my buddies yesterday about Harbaugh, and all of us have very different opinions about it. Exactly. I have a buddy that is like, yes, sign me up. I want Harbaugh with the Bears. Like he's won everywhere that he's been at. Like this is exactly what the Bears would need. I have another buddy who's like, no. Like I'd rather have his dad than have him. I can't stand him. I think he's the worst. I don't want that guy running my franchise, blah, blah, blah. And then another guy who's kind of indifferent about it. And that kind of speaks to who Harbaugh is. And I think he's one of those guys that, people have had very different impressions of him based on when he's been doing his thing. And I think there was a point when Michigan fans were like, I've had enough. This has run its course. And now he's a statue guy. I mean, that's how crazy this sport can change. And, for Harbaugh to be at this place now where people are going to dissect his legacy, and who knows what the NCAA is going to do with coming in, if they're going to take away wins. What won't matter to Michigan fans is what the NCAA says. He won them a title, their first non-shared national championship since the Harry Truman administration. Yeah. And I think there are going to be a lot of people that will forever be grateful that Jim Harbaugh decided to come home.
Yeah. I mean, it was 1948 when they won their last outright one. Up to 1948, counting that one, they claimed 10 national titles. Now they can claim 12, even though they split that one with Nebraska in 97. If we head back down to the South, there's a question, and it's almost like the clock is ticking on the ACC. I don't want the ACC to go away strictly for the basketball. I am a tradition, heroes guy. I love that. But when you got Clemson and Florida State, two of your flag bearers, acting like they don't want to be there, either strong leadership reins them in or that conference just falls apart. What do you think is going to happen?
I don't think they get out of the grant of rights anytime soon. Okay. It's 2036. It's really expensive.
Yeah.
If Florida State does it, I think there will be others who will keep a close eye on it and look at that exit fee, the hundreds of millions of dollars it would cost them to get out of that contract. I think Florida State's just kind of over it. I think they're just over it right now with the way that it played out with the playoff, with the way that it played out with the bowl game, everything with the ACC. They're that angsty teenager that's just sitting there feeling like I have no freedom. I just want to be on my own and live this life that I feel like I'm appreciated. And Florida State, I get it. I totally get it. I, at the same time, think that the grant of rights, while it is, I think, in many ways kind of limiting the growth of the ACC, it is also going to keep the conference intact for a bit. I don't think these lawyers are going to be able to find a way out of it anytime soon because, goodness, you know that they've been working on this for the last 2.5 years, and they haven't been able to come up with a solution yet other than that buyout fee. There's no language in there that's going to be able to get you out for a technicality. So, yeah, look, I think the conference is going to stay intact. It's just going to be lesser than the SEC and lesser than the Big Ten.
Yeah, and Jackie Sherrill, 32 years ago in Memphis at the Touchdown Club meeting, I remember it well, talked about 4 super conferences going forward and Notre Dame. So that makes 60. He thought there'd be 65. That leaves 68 other Division I schools. Jackie Sherrill was supposed to be on with us yesterday. He's rescheduled for next week, but he talked about recently having the national championship for the super conferences, and then the other schools would have their own. He said it would be just as important to them. How soon are we going to be there?
I think we are there.
Yeah.
I think we are. I mean, look, there was one group of 5 team that made the entire 4-team playoff in the 10 years of its existence. We had 40 spots that were available in those 10 years, and 39 went to power conferences, and that's including Notre Dame in that discussion. So I think we're already there. I mean, I think they kind of know that, and it's almost like their Super Bowl, their national championship is getting that automatic bid to get into the college football playoff. And this year it was getting into the New Year's Six, and Liberty won that opportunity this year by going undefeated, and then they got smacked by Oregon. I think it's going to continue to play out like that. I think there will be, maybe we'll see one of those group of 5 teams win a game in the first round of the 12-team playoff. I'm not going to rule that out at all, but winning a national championship is not going to happen. So it's going to be treated more so like that is what they're going to try and gain. And the money to be made from that is still absolutely there. I don't see them doing the FCS route of trying to come up with their own bracket and their own tournament, just because there's still so much to gain from getting into the college football playoff and getting that money.
Yeah. And now you look at Clemson, they ended up with 9 wins this year. I know their standard under Dabo, he's won 10 games or more 12 times in his career there. Prior to that, in 107 years or whatever of Clemson football, they hadn't even come close to that. Without Clemson and Florida State, the ACC's got major problems. But then you got NC State right there on the edge. North Carolina, there's a lot of hype. They can't do it. Does that conference just if the SEC were to expand, would they go after Clemson and Florida State because they've already got those states? Is that bringing sand to the beach, or is that just building another high rise?
I don't really think that's changing the game necessarily for the SEC. I don't. I think there would be some resistance with the Florida State thing. I think Florida State going independent seems like it would be on the table. I don't think it's a given that they would just join the SEC. I don't think it would feel the way that we felt with Washington and Oregon, where it was kind of just like, well, the Big Ten would be foolish not to get them. And I don't think it was some massive, pursuit in the way that it was with USC and UCLA. And so I don't think the SEC would be chomping at the bit to add those teams, as crazy as that is. And as much as Greg Sankey has talked about wanting to maintain the geographical integrity of the conference, I don't think that it would be a given. Now, would it still have a good chance of happening? Probably, because we know what FSU brings to the table as a football program. They would fit in with the SEC culture. Clemson, very similar thing. And geographically speaking, that's there. But trying to get into these other markets and trying to get into North Carolina. I mean, I know that's something that the SEC has talked about wanting to be able to do and wanting to, have a school in Virginia even and having the market there. Like there's a lot of appeal as opposed to staying in those same states. And so it wouldn't necessarily be like, all right, it's just a given if they were to somehow get out of the grant of rights.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun one to watch. And, lastly, when you look at the SEC, and we talked about Alabama a lot, Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss, I got to ask you about Florida. Billy Napier, you got everything in the world that you need at Florida, yet their schedule next year is the toughest. It may be the toughest in all of college football. Their opponents' combined records are like 106 and 51 who they face next year. Is Billy Napier going to make it, do you think?
I don't. And I was the person this year saying that it's ridiculous to think that they're going to fire him at the end of year 2. They had committed essentially $60 million to him. And that's, that you can get into the support staff and all the money that they spent there. Very well documented their efforts to beef that up. But year 3 is different. Year 3 is different because when you're 5-7 in year 2, you're 11-14 overall, and you're staring at that schedule, it feels like it's a very uphill climb. And I don't see a world in which Billy Napier is able to navigate that and get to 8-4 or something like that. Now, what would have to happen first, very likely, is Scott Strickland gets fired. He's the AD who obviously hired him. He's the AD who brought Dan Mullen to Gainesville. I think that would be the course of action that would let you know that this is happening. But yeah, it's just so difficult to see that when we saw all the issues that Florida had this year, and the fact that this was a team that, even though they had close opportunities to be able to get to that 6th win, what are we really talking about here? We're talking about 6-6. Like that's 7-5, maybe, if things had gone your way. So no, I think Florida is in a really, really tough spot right now. And it feels like Billy Napier is kind of dead man walking with the way that schedule sets up.
Yeah, it's just life in the SEC is it never gets easy. Even with Nick Saban retiring, it's going to be brutal. Hey, thank you so much for your time. As always, love having you on here. Let people know how they can follow all the great work you do all over social media, your daily podcasts and everything, because it's must-read material.
Yeah, I appreciate that. SaturdayDownSouth.com. I always tell people, one-stop shop for any college sports fan. Tons of great Saban coverage right now that we are just hammering since this news broke yesterday, and we're going to be talking about it obviously on Saturday Down South podcast a lot. We already did an emergency podcast last night. We'll have more on it tomorrow. A lot of episodes dropping over the course of the next few days that'll be digging into that. We're supposed to have Feinbaum on as well for the episode that'll come out early next week, so we'll get kind of his thoughts and his breakdown of that. But yeah, SaturdayDownSouth.com, the one-stop shop for any college sports fan.
Absolutely great stuff. Thank you so much. We'll be right back with more Kevin Skarbinski after this.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shop's health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought-after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal, and the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.
Welcome to Rumble, bringing half boxing, half strength, and 10 rounds of fire. Pull up, say what's up to our studio team, Check in and grab your gear. Don't have gloves? Don't have wraps? Don't worry, we got you.
You think you better than battle?
Find your starting spot. B means bag, F means floor. Make your way to the studio, find where all the magic happens, give Jab a little love on the way in, or snap a pic for the gram. Tap in with your trainer and get ready to bring the thunder. Eyes up at your Rumble trainer, fitness pro, DJ, MC extraordinaire.
All right, Rob Browne back here with you on this Thursday edition of Sidelines, and talking with Connor O'Gara Saturday Down South. I recommend strongly that you follow him and all the great work that he puts out every day. Having him on here, he covers a lot of ground. I love it. Let me say also the Vitamin Shop, 5338 Goodman Road in South Haven, Mississippi. Open Monday through Saturday, 9:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. Sundays, 10:30 a.m., 7 p.m. They have nutritionists, healthcare specialists on site. When you walk in there, you're not going to get a lot of, I don't know, I just work here. You're going to get people that know what they're doing. I'm a regular shopper there. I get the shot blocks, the goo for swimming, biking, running, working out. They've also got probiotics, all kinds of vitamins. Do your research. There's nothing like the Vitamin Shop, 5338 Goodman Road in Olive Branch, Mississippi. And in early March, Justin Ross and his partner will be opening up a second location in Oxford, Mississippi. And Rumble Boxing. Can't say enough good things about what they do, and can't believe this is the first of 3 locations she plans to open in the Memphis market, 1835 Union Avenue on the corner of Union and McLean in Midtown Memphis. Incredible workout. They have corporate deals. You want to bring your company in for team workouts, team building of bonds. Hard work pulls people together. You cannot beat Rumble Boxing Gym. All the gear that you need can be purchased on site. Okay, so it's all there, and when you get there, they've got people that'll help you, and they know what they're doing. All right, let's head to Tuscaloosa. Gary Harris, Tide 100.9 WVUA TV 23 is on with us right now. And Gary, we talked with Connor O'Gara Saturday Down South in the first segment, and yesterday afternoon it was around 2:30 or 3. Everybody's phones saw that. But, remember a year ago, I sent you on a Friday night, somebody had hacked a well-known sports writer's account and put out there, Nick Saban has told his team he's retiring. I immediately reached out to you and Rodney, and you told me what was going on. That's how I felt when I saw that news yesterday. I'm a trust but verify guy. Ronald Reagan with Gorbachev at Reykjavik, Iceland in 1987. But it's still hard to believe he's retiring. And I watched WBRC and WVTM out of Birmingham last night on the 10 o'clock news. We have the hookup up here in Memphis at the house. And people, it was like he had died. And like Connor said, he's still alive. But, I don't care who you're a fan of, you're going to miss him.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, this is an era in college football that's coming to an end. And again, you and I both remember Coach Bryant really well. My first year of TV was his last year coaching. So I actually, I was young, but I, technically covered him for a year. And I never thought you'd see the likes of Coach Bryant, and you won't. I mean, Coach Bryant was different just because of the time. But from a football standpoint, I'm on the Nick Saban bandwagon that he's the greatest to ever do it. Having been here for all 17 years of his tenure, watching him evolve, watching what he did when he got here, how he took a program that, yes, traditionally was one of the greatest programs, but was struggling at the time and had a lot, since Bryant and really Ray Perkins, because say what you want about Ray Perkins called the shots now. Worked for 2 years as, shooting video for his coach's show. But since Perkins there had, and Coach Stallings, certainly had success, but so certainly since Coach Stallings, but even probably since Coach Perkins, as far as having somebody that was that dominant in the athletic department as a football coach. And Coach Saban just stepped in and, he let Coach Moore know, Mal Moore, that, if I take the job, there's one voice in the football program, period. Yeah. And to watch him operate and watch him do what he did and to do it the way that he did it with all of the changes, Rob, it started not too long after, the first national championship, people started seeing, well, boy, if we don't do something, Alabama's going to run roughshod because physically they're going to outman you. He's going to recruit at a level. So people, these innovative coaches started figuring out how to spread the field and, the RPOs and as traditional football, defensive football, when you saw the run block, guys run blocking, you came up to play the run. And all of a sudden, guys were run blocking, and then they were throwing off of that. So your eyes were getting to see. But he adjusted to that. He brought in Kiffin. They learned the spread together. And then in the last couple of years with the NIL and the transfer portal, having to deal with that. But he did it very, very well. And then this year, there'll people say, well, he didn't win a national championship. He still went out on top. Listen, I've talked about this. How many schools in this league would be doing paintings of a 12-2 season, 9-0 in the SEC, winning the SEC championship, and going to the 4-team college football playoff and playing Michigan to overtime in the Rose Bowl? So he's going out on top. He's going out in his way. Getting back to what you were talking about yesterday, I was like everybody else, I knew there was a meeting. I texted with some people that were in the building, and I was convinced that 4:00 meeting was just going to be a procedural meeting, the usual, January meeting. We're going back to school. This is the plans for the off season. So I know the players didn't know. I know they didn't know, and I don't know that the staff knew. Now, did Greg Browne know? Did the president know? Did the board of trustees know? Maybe. But at the same time, the university didn't even get a statement out until 2.5 hours after he told the team. So the team had no inkling of this. And, he walked into that team meeting and, they were hit with it. So, it's an end of an era. I'm going to be interested to see how the next few days unfold. I know Coach Saban is in the office already this morning. They've been in already for about an hour. And, I'm sure he's going to be working with Greg Browne, although Greg Browne is a one-man search committee, but I'm sure he's going to be working to make the transition a smooth one. I don't know if he'll have any say-so in who the new coach will be, but I'm sure he'll do what he can to make sure that the process and the success of Alabama football continues, because that speaks to his legacy too once he's gone.
Yeah, Kevin Skarbinski's going to be on with us in a minute, and I thought it'd be neat to have, because you all are two true grit journalists. Y'all do a great job of covering Alabama, of Auburn, of all this stuff. And when Kevin was on, and Wimp Sanderson has a show on right before you with Barry
right
Sanders,
now,
at 100.9, and I started listening to it during the pandemic because things had changed so much, but I enjoy the hell out of it. So Kevin's on our show back in late November after he'd been on with Wimp Sanderson, and he said, Wimp Sanderson doesn't just say things out of the blue, and he tossed it out there. A guy that's been in Alabama for 32 years as an assistant and a head coach and will always be Alabama. And he said, what are you hearing about Nick Saban maybe this being his last year? And Kevin talked about that, and I called him last night to remind him. But a lot of people had been thinking, but he's not old. He's only 72. And you remember Coach Bryant was only 69. But he looked a lot older than 69 compared to, say, the way, Nick Saban and him. But they're both ultra successful. Do you think maybe Nick Saban, he's not going to coach anywhere else, but he's got to look at it and say, hey man, there's not a single recruiting class, if they stayed all 4 years, that did not win a national championship. I mean, who else can say that?
Nobody. I mean, ever in history. I mean, listen, I think he's going to have something on his agenda. I think he's going to have something on the table when he gets done with coaching. I mean, will it be TV? I don't think anybody knows for sure. Like I said, I think we're still just all processing the information, Rob. And again, you're right about Coach Sanderson. He's been saying for some time that it might be Coach Saban's final year. But again, I don't know how many people knew. I know the players didn't know. I don't feel like the staff knew. Again, did the university president, the board of trustees, Greg Browne know? Possibly. But I don't think that this was something that a lot of people were in on. I mean, I think when he walked into that meeting yesterday with the players and the staff, that's when they found out that he was retiring. So whether or not he put together this plan for a long time, I don't know. I can't speak to that. I didn't, was I shocked? No, but I was surprised. I mean, I was surprised. Like I said, I texted with somebody, a staff member, early in the afternoon, and I felt confident when he texted me back. I don't think he was being dishonest. He just said, I said, this is swirling around. He said, well, that would stink. He said, but as far as I know, it's just a regular meeting that we have every year when you come back in January for school, procedural with the players and talking about the off season and you know, getting kind of touching on spring. So, you know, maybe there are some people that knew. And again, I have to think somebody at the university knew that he wouldn't leave his athletics director and the president and the board of trustees in the dark. I have to think that, because regardless, Greg Browne, I know, already had a list ready to go. But at the same time, I have to think the wheels are already in motion for the new coach, because with the portal opening back up with Saban leaving and, you know, Ryan Williams already decommitting, you can't just leave this job unfilled for too long. Your roster will hemorrhage with the modern game of football. So, you know, I wouldn't be shocked if something's announced tomorrow. I can't imagine it going through the weekend before Alabama names the head football coach.
Yeah, and Kevin Skarbinski, the Birmingham lead, and Scarbo Knows is on with us right now with Gary Harris in Tuscaloosa. And I talked with my friend Matt Dean. He's going to be on with us in about 15 minutes. His son Tyler is director of scouting with Dan Lanning at Oregon, and he spent 4 years with Jimbo, now just finished his second year, and we're going to get his thoughts. I'm not going to steal his thunder, what he thinks is going on with Dan Lanning. Everybody will talk about him, but I threw out the name Jed Fish in the first hour with Connor O'Gara, who's the coach at Arizona. He's a Florida guy, but interesting. But Kevin, jump in here with us. I know you've got thoughts. I did watch the Birmingham news again last night, and I know y'all have got great coverage on WVUA TV 23. It's a big story developing.
Well, the biggest in college football since Nick Saban landed at the airport, I would say. Good morning, guys. It is certainly a historic day. Yesterday was a historic day in the history of not just this state, but that sport. And, you know, Gary, I heard the last thoughts from you about what went down, how this may have gone down. The one thing we know about Nick Saban is he was meticulous in his planning to a T. And so it would, and he grew. If at first when he arrived, and I think a lot of people had the sense that he was a coaching mercenary, that he would come, he would fix things, he would win a championship or two, and then he would move on to the next challenge. But he came to embrace that place the way it embraced him. And not just the university, the city, the state, it really meant something to him. So it would be shocking. The most shocking thing of all would be if he just did this completely on the spur of the moment, did not inform anyone beforehand. It's not a surprise he didn't inform a large circle of people, but as you said, Gary, to leave Greg Byrne and Stuart Bell and the board of trustees, and I know some of them have said they did not know, but to leave everyone in the dark until the last minute would be very un-Nick Saban-like.
I agree. I mean, I think at least an inner circle of people at the university had to know, because like Kevin said, Rob, I don't think this is just something he woke up yesterday morning and decided to do. Now, I don't have any evidence of that. Maybe he did. Maybe he just woke up and said it's time. But you know, that appears unlikely based on the way he does things. And like Kevin said, he's meticulous in everything that he does, process oriented, has a plan. So I have to think that that someone knew. Now, watching him coach this year, watching him work, talking to people that were around him that are on the staff, they didn't, you know, all this talk about he was different. Well, maybe he was different because the way he has to work around the players is so different, because players have leverage now like they've never had. But as far as the way he worked, the way he went at it, the way he recruited, you know, that's why a lot of people felt like he was not going to leave, is because he was on the recruiting trail. One staffer told me, you know, players would say, "Are you going to be there for 4 years?" And he would say, "Well, can you promise me you're going to be there for 4 years?" You know, that he was at it. So I don't think, while he was thinking about this, obviously, because I don't think you come to this decision, I don't think he just woke up and decided to retire, but I don't know that it was something that he decided until recently, because and even yesterday, you know, people said he was in the office going about business as usual. So again, for the players and the staff, I don't think they had a clue when they walked into that 4 o'clock meeting. You
know, of the names, Dan Lanning is the one everybody throws out. And what we also have to worry about, y'all know what I'm talking about, people hacking Twitter accounts of well-known writers and journalists like y'all. Not that y'all do it, but they'll do it and they put it out there, and then everybody just auto sends to everyone they know. So if you had to just guess, I'll start with you, Kevin, and then you, Gary. Give me 3 names you think will be prominently featured in this search. And Gary's right. It could be over tomorrow. They could say, here's Dan Lanning. He's our new coach. We don't know.
Yeah, I would be surprised if they were starting from scratch at 4 o'clock yesterday.
Yeah.
Again, Gary said it. Greg Browne he's a very forward-thinking leader of that athletic department. He knew this day was coming at some point. He may not have known exactly when until very, very recently, but there had to be a plan in place. So there were names. Dan Lanning checks off so many boxes. It almost sounds too easy. It almost sounds too seamless to get a guy who in some ways resembles a young Nick Saban, who has had success, who has been baptized in the process, if you will, as a grad assistant, who then worked for Kirby Smart at Georgia, helped win a national championship there as a defensive coordinator, and has already demonstrated some pretty good chops at running his own program in 2 years at Oregon. He's a defensive guy. That's his expertise. But his offense with Bo Nix the last 2 years has been lights out. So he just seems to check so many boxes. It almost seems too easy. Good point you made, Rob, about be careful of information flying across the internet, because and that's one thing that's very different from the search to hire Nick Saban. There weren't as many people with as much access to as much information and misinformation as there are now. So there will be caution. I would advise caution for fans trying to figure out what's really happening. But Lanning makes a lot of sense. And to me, again, having gotten to know Greg Browne, having studied his history a bit, he seems like a Greg Browne kind of guy, if you will. Not necessarily someone who's at the top of the profession yet. He's certainly moving in that direction, but someone who has seems to have all the potential in the world to get there in very short order. I think Sark makes a lot of sense, although he's got a great situation at Texas. Why would you leave that where you are building a legacy? You're not following someone who had built a legacy, and it just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense for him to leave that situation. There's similar situations. Alabama's had far more success than Texas has, obviously, but he would be a guy I would want to have a conversation with him to get his thoughts on the job. I don't think Lane Kiffin is real at all, to be honest, based on the way he left and some things that have happened in the interim. Could he do the job? I think he probably could, but I don't think he'll get that opportunity. He's one I would be surprised if they actually hired. And then there are the off-board names, or the out of the box thinking that Greg Browne also likes to do. Jed Fish is certainly a guy that would fit into that category. I don't know. And look, Nick Saban, we hear this all the time, win the press conference. Nick Saban, he won the press conference. He won the flight. He won the arrival at the airport. He won the first meeting with the team. He won every step of the way. But you don't necessarily have to win the press conference. You got to win football games. And you got to win a lot of them. You got to win championships. You got to compete for championships to fulfill the possibilities of that job, to do what Alabama's capable of doing. You don't have to do it necessarily as well as Nick Saban did, because no one ever did it, including Coach Bryant, as well as Nick Saban has done. But you got to do it at a high level. So there may be someone that no one has mentioned yet. That it's hard to imagine who that might be, because just about everybody under the sun has been mentioned. But that's kind of my thought.
Yeah. Gary?
Yeah, I want to piggyback on what Kevin said about Lanning, because I kind of feel the same way. It's almost too obvious, and my phone started blowing up not long after the announcement or the word got out that Saban had told the team he was retiring. Lanning. Lanning's in town. Lanning's this. And I initially I was like, yeah, just like Kevin said, it makes sense. But then I thought back to the basketball coaching search, and I had a lot of people calling me about Thad Matta, the same thing. I'm talking about people I respect. I'm not talking about just fans. It's going down with Thad Matta. And it was almost like it was a smokescreen the whole time. Greg Burns negotiating with Nate Oates. And Byrne in his statement yesterday said, if you don't hear it from me, don't pay any attention to it. And the next time you hear from me, I'll be introducing a coach. So that's the thing that scares me about Lanning is it's almost like that's being floated out there to kind of allude to what Kevin said. And then Burns may be working some back channels. And you mentioned both of you mentioned Jed Fish. I think there could be a couple of coaches that, Lance Leopold's a guy that I've been told that Oates holds in, or that Byrne holds in high regard. Now he's like 60 years old. Yeah. So he's at Kansas. So I don't really know where this is going. I do agree that on paper, Dan Lanning is, like Kevin said, he checks off all the boxes, but it's just, he's so out there right now. That's my hesitancy on Dan Lanning. It's just too obvious. It's too easy. And that is what leads me to believe that, again, I don't know if smokescreen's the right term, but that Lanning's being floated and that there's something else going on behind the scenes. We'll see. That's all I can tell you. I don't know. I don't know that anybody knows right now other than Greg Byrne, and he may not even know for sure who he's going to hire. But I do think that, as we've talked about, the wheels are turning. I think he was prepared for this, and I don't think it'll take long.
I don't know if you guys mentioned this before I came on, but I was glad to hear that you did give Wimp Sanderson some credit because Gary, I know you guest on his show regularly. I do once a week as well. And
I want to get him as a guest.
Well, he's giving himself plenty of credit this morning, Kevin. I can promise you. He's been doing a victory lap.
I'm sure he is. Wimp will dine out on this for the rest of his life. No doubt.
I texted Barry last night and I said, after Wimp does his initial victory lap, please move on. Don't let him do it for 2 hours.
Yes. Barry texted me and said, he said, looks like Dad knew what he was talking about. But this is where I'm going to say, he asked, this was late in the season, one of our weekly visits, and he said he was very strong about the possibility of this happening, but the way he did it, he was asking me what I thought, what I had heard, and he said, what do you think about Tommy Rees as the next coach at Alabama? And I almost fell out of my chair because that certainly had never occurred to me. And of all the shocking things that could happen as far as who the next guy is, that might be the most shocking.
That would be a stunner.
I have no information that would actually come true. But Wimp didn't report it. He didn't predict it. He didn't blue plate it. He suggested it. He wondered and threw it out there. So who knows?
Yeah.
Hey, Rob, I got to go, but thank you guys. I enjoyed it.
Hey, Gary, great. We're looking. I'll be tuning into you as soon as I finish because you're on 9 to 11. So thank you so much. We'll do it again next week. All right. Winifred E. Wimp Sanderson from Florence, Alabama, and one of my friends, Rich Gray, I worked with for 12 years, he's living down in Foley now. His parents live in Daphne. Alabama fan from birth, and his dad, Dickie Gray, and Wimp Sanderson were really close friends. They grew up in Florence. I think that's where Wimp is from. But I think he's really good on that show with Barry Sanderson. I listen to a lot of shows all around. And folks, you want to know what's going on? Tuning in to Gary Harris helps you a lot, as does following Kevin Skarbinski with the Birmingham Lead and Scarbo Knows. Like what you said, it's like a book, a couple of books I read. It's a series. It's a 2-part book called Bodyguard of Lies. And it's about the Allied invasion, 6 June, 1944 at Normandy. It's an unbelievable story of how we fooled the Germans. And it's just, you got to read it, but you're right. It's Al Goldman, head of technical market analysis at A.G. Edwards, all the years I worked there, was brilliant. And in the middle of all the chaos, he would say stuff like, look, everybody can't be right at the same time. And it's the obvious choice, Dan Lanning, and stay on with us because Matt Dean's going to be on in a minute. He's waiting for a contractor to come by his house. It's not the cable guy, but the contractor. He goes, I may be a couple of minutes late, but he'll be right with us. But we get into this search, and it's asked here. Let me go back in here and ask this one. Maury Gaston, which Arizona school did Byrne come from? Is it Arizona State?
He was the athletic director at the University of Arizona.
Okay. All right. So,
and you know, that's interesting, Rob, because he has ties, you know, in the West, not just at Arizona. His dad was Bill was the AD at Oregon for a time. So, so Greg has a national perspective, and he has national ties and contacts beyond maybe what any previous Alabama athletic director had. So that's why, and it's funny because fans call him the ninja, that he operates, you know, very much in the shadows. And Gary mentioned the Nate Oates hire. I don't know how many people saw that coming, but certainly he nailed it with what Alabama basketball has done in the short time that Nate has been there. 2 SEC regular season championships, 2 SEC tournament championships, a #1 seed last year, #1 in the country. You know, they've been one of the best programs in the country since Nate's gotten there. So, and that was not something that was on almost anyone's radar when it happened. So just when you think, you know, hey, look, I've covered enough of these coaching searches through the years. I was on the front lines of the hunt for Nick Saban, and was fortunate that I had some great sources. I've got a prop, Rob. I've got a copy of the November 22nd, 2006 Birmingham News.
Yeah.
And this was 4 days before Alabama fired Mike Shula. And the headline on my column says, Bama makes inquiry about Nick Saban.
Wow.
And I got more blowback, negative blowback about the very idea. First of all, they hadn't even fired Shula yet. And the very idea that they were so arrogant that they thought they could hire Nick Saban, that he would leave the Miami Dolphins to come back to college at a place that, frankly, at that time was a mess.
Yeah.
That had been through a succession of coaches who couldn't do the job or couldn't handle the heat of living in Tuscaloosa. Looking at you, Coach Fran, and just they were a mess. And why would Nick Saban step into that? Well, I was fortunate again. I had a lot of good sources throughout that story and was able to stay ahead of it from start to finish. But it is very difficult. Coaching searches are very hard. There are people that put out information. You always ask yourself, and on any story, why is someone telling me this? Why is this source giving me this information to share publicly, but not putting their name behind it? But they have a reason to know, but what's their reason for wanting other people to know?
Yeah.
So you have to really vet your sources, vet your information. And, you know, Chris Lowe nailed it yesterday. And you know, kudos to Chris. He's one of the best in the business and has a great relationship with Nick Saban and people at Alabama and Nick Saban's agent, Jimmy Sexton, obviously. So this one's going to be interesting. But I think it will be sooner rather than later. I don't think there's no way they started yesterday at 4 o'clock looking for a coach.
Yeah, because already you've seen Ryan Williams, you know, decommit, but he reclassified from a junior to a senior out of Saraland, and he's one of the best players in the country. He's a 5-star receiver. You know, his dad played at Auburn, left the team, but from people I've talked to that know this, the dad loves Auburn. He still loves Auburn. And he goes, I'm not going to tell him where to go, but I'm not going to get in his way. I think he ends up at Auburn. But the one thing people are, again, I don't ever cheer when someone gets hurt. Another thing that, you know, 9 Alabama players are in the portal. Damn it, they're still Alabama. And that's why they'll name a coach quickly. And they will get out there, the Red Elephant Club, the benevolent and protective, kind people they are. They will go do whatever is needed to make it happen. If you think about it, college football was launched in the South in 1892. For 42 of those years, they had Paul W. Bryant and Nicholas Lou Saban as the coach. It's almost a third of the time. And, you know, you beat them, it means something. The SEC, Kevin, right now there are going to be people wondering, is the Big Ten now the new big dog? No, I think the SEC schools are going to double down. And, you know, if you can hang on, we're going to take a quick break. I want to get back. There's even people now saying Arthur Blank and the Falcons are trying to get, you know, Kirby's interested in the Falcons. I mean, Job wouldn't take that job. That's just my thoughts. But we're going to be right back. Kevin Skarbinski, one of the best in America, the Birmingham lead, and Scarbo knows, is with us. Matt Dean, Frank Duffy's going to check in for a few minutes with us to talk about how he, as an LSU fan, feels his love for Nick Saban. LSU fans still just love him. The fact that he left and went and won 6 national championships they think are theirs. John Hartwell hopefully can be on with us as well, but a lot in hour number 2 right after this quick commercial break.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
All right, Rob Browne back here with Kevin Skarbinski. And let me say something real quick. Today, Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m., 6 p.m., Hewlett & Dunn Boot and Clothing Company on the historic square in Collierville, Tennessee. You can order online from anywhere in America or the world. They've got over 7,000 pairs of men's and women's boots. They're the second largest Filson dealer in the Southeast. You watch the show Yellowstone, everybody does. You want to see Rip's jacket, John Dutton's ranch jacket, Beth Dutton's clothes. They've got it all there. That's Pendleton, Schaefer Outdoors, the wardrobe consultants for Yellowstone, Devil Dog jeans, Rock Mount shirts. Those are those untucked shirts that Elvis wore, Ronald Reagan, Bob Dylan still wears them, Robert Plant. I'm thinking Willie Nelson wears him a Rock Mount. The CEO was still answering the phones up until he died at 107.5. Pretty amazing. They've got it all out there. Hewlett & Dunn, Charles Hall and his wife Laura, the owners. Great people to work with. I'll be heading out there later today. HewlettandDunn.com. Again, I'm open Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Kevin, real quick, I want to get this in about basketball because, Matt, you haven't been on with Matt Dean before. Matt has been a basketball coach. He coached with Herb Hildegren, the coach at Rhodes College, the men for about 16 years. Then he was the head coach of the women for 16 years. So he is a basketball junkie. And I'm embarrassed to say this. Like, we love it when you're on Saturdays, but I'm going to have to start getting you on during the week some too, where we can get into some basketball. Matt, his Twitter handle is Dino Hoops. I mean, he loves it. And his son Tyler is on the staff with Dan Lanning at Oregon, director of scouting. He spent 4 years with Jimbo Fisher at A&M and now in his second year at Oregon. He's going to be with us in just a minute. But you are the only sports writer ever from the great state of Alabama to be inducted into the U.S. Basketball Writers Hall of Fame. And that happened last April down there in Houston at the Final Four. There's, again, SEC basketball last night over at the Pavilion. Chris Beard is doing some stuff. I want to get your thoughts about Chris Beard, Nate Oates, Bruce Pearl in the SEC, because as incredible as you are with football knowledge, my God, basketball is your passion. That's what's scary. It's actually it's a privilege.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm a hoop head. I have been since I was a child. I used to shovel snow off the court at the playground back in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, so I could shoot in the winter when I was a kid. And I've always loved the sport. And it's going to be another dog-eat-dog SEC season. But the last 3 SEC regular season champions have come from the state of Alabama. Alabama, then Auburn, then Alabama again. I wouldn't be surprised if that streak continues. And right now, I'd give a lean to Auburn, even though they don't have a superstar. The way they're playing together, the way that the point guards have meshed and accepted their roles, they're both outstanding players, Aiden Holloway and Trey Donaldson, and they are sharing that responsibility and doing it beautifully. And the team goes 11 deep. They don't drop off when they go to the bench. different guys step up at different times. Jalen Williams is developing into a star.
Yeah.
He hit that big shot against Texas A&M the other night, the three-pointer that really sealed it late. And that was a significant victory because Buzz Williams and the Aggies have had Auburn's number for some time now. So that this Auburn team is legit. And this Alabama team, what they did in the second half against South Carolina, it was, 1 minute you're watching and it's a back and forth game. That if you change the channel or if you went to make some popcorn, you come back and Alabama's up 20. That's how suddenly they can score in bunches. Mark Sears is becoming a star. He's really stepped up. He's the leading scorer in the SEC. So both of those teams will be in contention, but it's going to be a rugged road. Look at what happened in Starkville last night. Tennessee gets beat.
Yeah.
And Mississippi State, Tolu Smith is back. That team is dangerous. The new coach, what Chris Beard is showing that coaching matters. Talent matters, but talent plus coaching is a pretty powerful combination. So he's getting certainly the most out of the Rebels. Look, there's almost no gimmies in the league. And the champion we could see a champion with 3 or 4 losses. Would not be a surprise, but it'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, it will be. Matt Dean, this is Kevin Skarbinski, U.S. basketball writer, Hall of Fame writer, the only one ever from the great state of Alabama. He's from Pottsville, PA. You are from Davenport, Iowa. And I was telling him a little about you. You're kind of passionate about basketball over at Rhodes College in Memphis. And you've got, one of your former assistants is now the women's head coach at Florida International or Florida Atlantic?
Florida Atlantic, Jennifer Sullivan. That's correct.
Yeah. So, this is 2 hoop heads. I love this term that Kevin gave, a hoop head. But before we get back to talk some basketball, I want to get your thoughts. Tyler, your son, just finished his 2nd year with Dan Lanning at Oregon. What are you hearing there? Interesting thing, we had Gary Harris on from Tuscaloosa and Connor O'Gara Saturday down south in the first hour, Matt. And they said it's almost like it's too obvious. It's like they're saying Dan Lanning, but they're really going after someone else. What are you hearing from the great state of Oregon and the city of Eugene where it rains occasionally?
Well, it's a pleasure to be on, Kevin. Nice to meet you. I have to be a little confidential in how I phrase this because I do have some inside sources here. But unless something drastically changes, Dan Lanning's not going anywhere. He is just brought in a tremendous class. I think in some rankings, it's top 3 or 4 in the country, 22-5 in 2 years. They have everything they need there with Phil Knight. They did well in the portal again. Heck, not only did Bo Nix come back last year, he played the bowl game against Liberty. I saw some things last night where some of his players were, matter of fact, there was a TV station in Eugene that had reported he was in Tuscaloosa at the time, and it was false. And because Oregon, you got to understand, ever since the Chip Kelly days when it was kind of like their gold standard, and Chip left, I think, to go to the Eagles at the time. They have had a bunch of folks bounce on them, except for Helfrich, who actually I think was asked to leave. And I think Dan's staying. I think he's got something special going on there. Now, this is an old saying in basketball too. You don't want to be the one that replaces Nick Saban. You want to be the one that replaces the replacement of Nick Saban, in my opinion. So do I think long-term that Dan Lanning may have a course to return back to Alabama, where he was a young member of that 2015 incredible staff they had? I would say yes to that, but I don't think now's the time. And going back to your point, Rob, I think it is a nice diversion. Everybody's thinking that Dan's the guy, and of course he wants this job right now. I heard him say one time he's moved his family like 8 times in the last decade, 12 years, whatever. Wow. I think he's ready to be settled for a while. That's my opinion.
Yeah,
Matt, that's a great point. We never think we think these guys exist in a vacuum, but they have families.
They do.
And look, if Terry Saban didn't want to leave Miami for Tuscaloosa back in January of 2007, Nick Saban would never have become the Alabama coach.
That's right.
He's the one who took the calls from Mal Moore when he flew to South Florida on a mission, and she took the calls. She convinced Nick to let Mal have an in-person visit. The wife is so important. The family is so important, and we tend to overlook that. So I appreciate you mentioning that, Matt. That's a key part of the equation for any coach contemplating a move.
Yeah. Frank
Kevin,
Duffy.
he's got 3 young boys, and his wife Sophia is a great lady, and they like the stability right now. They do.
Yeah, I mean, I remember talking one time to Gene Chizik at Auburn, which you did many times, Kevin, and talked about moving all the time. And he said when they left Auburn after when he went out, and he came back and he got that job, he said, "This is it. We're not leaving again." And of course, you know, that's what happens is Larry Fedora got him to go to North Carolina. Now he's back up there. He went back up there with Mac Browne, who he loves. But Tony Barnhart said it on the show a couple of weeks ago. Players play and coaches coach. They always will. I mean, I like that. This is great insight. And Frank Duffy, you're driving somewhere, to New Orleans, whatever. You're on with Kevin Skarbinski and Matt Dean here on this Thursday. I'm going to get messed up and think it's a Saturday with this lineup, but it is a Thursday edition of Sidelines. But Frank, Nick Saban, the news broke yesterday afternoon. Like I told Kevin and Matt, I thought maybe someone had hacked an account from a journalist because that does happen. And I kept asking people, is this real? Is this real? It's real, Frank. Whoa.
You called this a month and a half ago. You know, you called it.
You're talking about Kevin did.
Yeah, Scarborough. I was just calling him by my nickname.
Yeah. I cut you off. I didn't want people to think it was me.
Yeah, no, Scarborough, you called it when you said Wimp Sanderson and his reaction to Nick Saban. You called it a month and a half ago, so you're on record. And Matt Dean, great seeing you, buddy. By the way, I love your Wisconsin brethren from the Big Ten. They were so nice to hang out with in Tampa for the ReliaQuest Bowl. We had a great time down in Tampa, and they couldn't have been more congenial. I love hanging out with them from our days at Houston when we played them, and then when we went up for that bucket list trip to Lambeau. No, yesterday I was reminded of the eloquent words of Gerald R. Ford. Our long national nightmare is now over. That's the way that all LSU fans felt about the news yesterday. We've been like in a 17-year bad nightmare that you can't get away from. And every time you turn around, the scene is reset of him holding up a crystal football or a gold tube that looks like the leg from a Christmas Story, and knowing and feeling in your heart of hearts that every one of those would have been an LSU national championship. So this is a day that we've been waiting for a long time. Just like when the scarecrow hit the witch with the bucket of water and she fizzled down into a heap. That's what LSU fans feel like right now. I'm just happy we've gotten through it. And by the way, to all my Alabama brethren out there, I'm just going to leave you with one thought. You never forget your first. So just keep that in mind. You enjoy those 6, but they came after the first. And don't be shocked, guys. I'm making the call right now on a fall Saturday evening as John Hartwell's Warhawks come into Tiger Stadium. We're going to be celebrating the 25th anniversary of the 2003 National Championship LSU Tiger football team and Nick Saban's first national championship. And I think just like we were allies with the Japanese in 1950 during the Korean War, 5 years after dropping an atomic bomb on them, we will have Nick Saban in Tiger Stadium to celebrate this.
That will be that'll be a hell of a scene. Kevin, Matt, respond to that. And Matt, by the way, Matt, I just saw the news about, and I want you to say it. That is really sad. We were just talking about Herb Hildren.
Well, I didn't mean to share that with you, Rob. It happened Monday night. Our longtime, my mentor, Herb Hildman, who is the winningest coach at Rhodes College history in men's basketball, 34 years, 473 games, took a team to Elite Eight, multiple NCAA tournament appearances, multiple Coach of the Year awards. He fought a long bout with scleroderma and passed away Monday night. We had the chance, guys, homecoming. We brought a lot of his former players back and their spouses and kids. We named the court after him in September, and it was just a really touching thing. And it was ironic to me this morning. Frank, I was listening to Marcus Spears talk on ESPN, who has a very great story about Coach, because this, Frank, when he was recruited, he was on the offensive side of the ball. And as he said today, it was pretty contentious. And Saban said, no, I think it's the best term for you and for us if you go on the defensive side of the ball. And Marcus made a quote about Coach Saban. It's kind of like the way I feel about Coach Hilgeman. It wasn't a 4-year decision. It was a 40-year decision, right? And just the week, I lost my mentor, Coach Hilgeman, on Monday. Nick Saban retires. Then less than 24 hours later, Bill Belichick retires. And you go back, Belichick and Saban were together in Cleveland.
Yes.
It kind of all started for them together. And they both just ironic.
I think the success that Belichick was having in New England is the reason why Nick Saban left LSU to go to Miami.
Yeah.
I think he was watching that.
No doubt, Frank. And I will tell you this, Frank, I thought the LSU-Wisconsin game, even though I'm an Iowa guy, was one of the best bowl games. I really thought early on Wisconsin was kind of taking it to them. And I thought your Tigers stepped up, man. It was a heck of a game. It was probably one of the most entertaining games because Wisconsin historically, will put it on the ground and line of scrimmage type team going back to the Barry Alvarez days. But they were able to, score some points. We all know the Tigers need some new direction on defense. I think we would all be
blood. We cleaned house. But we got new blood coming in. We got the DC coming in from Missouri, which I'm heartened by. But yeah, you're right. Wisconsin doubled their touchdown pass outlet of the entire season in one half against us. But it was an entertaining game. That is exactly the word that I used sitting there for a meaningless bowl game. It was quite entertaining, and it was a beautiful day. And look, if you can't go have fun down in Tampa when the Saints are playing on a day before and the Tigers are playing, and you get 2 wins, it was a fun time to go down.
That's right.
Kevin, jump in here. Look at these comments. Saban never gets the job if Rich Rod wife doesn't veto moving to Tuscaloosa. We all remember that kind of frantic coaching search there that was going on. Looks like the contractor has showed up at Matt's house, so he'll be back with us in a second. At least he wasn't waiting on Larry the Cable Guy, who will be there twixt 7 and 11. But Kevin, going back in history, how crazy was that search, or was it not crazy?
Well, it was crazy because, again, there was disbelief. When I first reported, like I said, like I showed you the newspaper from 2006, before they fired Mike Shula, that they were targeting Nick Saban from the start. And so people didn't believe that. They didn't think that he would leave the Dolphins to come back to an Alabama program that was a complete mess at the time. And then there were inquiries made to Steve Spurrier. They were aiming high. They weren't firing Mike Shula to hire an up-and-comer or a guy with potential. They wanted a proven championship coach. And so Saban and Spurrier were at the top of their list. And then what happened was, one of the conditions in the backstage, back channel conversations that were going on, Nick Saban made it clear he was not going to talk to anyone affiliated with Alabama in any way until after the Dolphins season was over. Yeah. Now, at some point, Alabama people got nervous. There were some Alabama boosters, power people, decision makers who said, what if we wait and he says no? Then where will we be? Who can we hire at that point? And so that led to the Rich Rod detour, if you will. And I still remember the Birmingham News, our Alabama beat writer at the time, Ian Rappaport. Now you see him on the NFL Network. Yeah, he reported, and this was absolutely right, that they had agreed in principle to a deal. Rich Rod's agent was in Tuscaloosa working out a contract. Well, the next morning, it was a Friday morning, I still remember it vividly, half of the state of West Virginia showed up in Rich Rod's living room. I don't know if the governor was there, but if he wasn't, he had a representative. There They basically went to Rich Rod and said, what do you want? You can have it. We'll give you whatever you need, whatever you want to stay. The story about Rich Rod's wife and Paul Feinbaum insulting her on the radio, well, he certainly did that. I don't know that was really the reason that Rich Rod said no. It probably contributed to it. However, there was such a strong push from the leadership in the state, not just at West Virginia University, but the state of West Virginia, to convince Rich Rod to stay. And I'll share a story, again, one of my favorite reporting stories ever. That very day, after Rich Rod said no, someone affiliated with Alabama reached out to someone close to Nick Saban to see if he was still interested. And Saban was on the practice field with the Dolphins. Saban called back his contact and was told what was going on. And Nick Saban said, and I believe this, I got this as strong as you can get it without hearing it from Nick Saban himself. Nick Saban said, according to my information, they wouldn't be in this mess if they had listened to me in the first place. Get me the effing job. And I reported that not in so many words, then the very next day. And again, people laughed. And I think it was a week later that Nick Saban said, I guess I have to say it, I'm not going to be the Alabama coach, which he regretted, and it hurt him. The blowback he got, people thought he was a robot. He was a Terminator. I had a long conversation with him the first June he was in Tuscaloosa. He was hurt by that he was called a liar. He was just slammed in Miami on ESPN across the country. And the way he handled that, he did not handle it well. There was really no way to handle it well when you're in that situation. But he wasn't 100% certain he was going to take the job, but he was definitely interested. But he was going to put him off until after the season. So that's what happened that's why they detoured to Rich Rod. And fortunately for them, Rich Rod said no, and Nick Saban said yes.
And by the way, you know who else was making a run at Nick Saban at that time? Most people don't know this, but I have it on high authority. LSU was making a run, and we were going to dump Les Miles to go back after Saban. It was in the works while Saban was courting with Alabama. LSU was also doing the exact same thing. LSU's goal, they would have fired Les Miles to take back Nick Saban. That was in the works.
Yeah,
and I got very high up.
And that just shows you, how valued he was and still is, and who knows what would have happened if they'd have made the trade for Drew Brees. That orthopedic
Drew Brees is amazing, Rob. Literally, it's the tiger or the ladies, scenario for us Louisiana folks. If Drew Brees goes to Miami, Nick Saban stays there, and at least we wouldn't have won the 6 national championships, but Alabama wouldn't have either. But so we wouldn't have to endure that. But the Saints wouldn't have given New Orleans a Super Bowl. So it truly is the lady or tiger of which door we were going to wind up getting. So I guess we have to just take this. We got to endure watching Alabama hoist 6 trophies, which we consider ours. But we got a Lombardi trophy sitting on Poydras Street.
Yeah, you're right. Matt Dean, looking at all this stuff that all the coaches. If this would have happened and that would have happened, it's unbelievable. And now, again, we mentioned names. Franz Beard called me yesterday when I was out after the show, talked about Jed Fish from PK Young High School, was coaching quarterbacks. Spurrier makes him a GA. His roommate at Florida is, I believe, the general manager of the Philadelphia Eagles. You're an Eagles fan, aren't you, Kevin?
Yeah, kind of, sort of. We used to play Harold Carmichael back in the day when I was a kid. We'd throw the ball up and try to go up high point it before anyone used the phrase high point. I was going way back to my childhood.
By the way, Scarborough will tell you it's not Eagles, it's Eagles.
Eagles.
Yeah.
How many of Ewans are going to the game? Let's go get a sandwich at Primanti Brothers.
Go Eagles.
I love it. But Matt, all this being said, all these coaching searches from the athletic directors, they've got to throw some names out there just to keep the fans at bay. That's what happened. But they've got a plan. do you have to wait? Is there a period? People are asking me. I'm getting a lot of texts, so I'm just going to relay some of them verbally. Do you have to wait 10 days? Are there employment laws that say you got to do this or that? Or can you just say, that's who our coach is going to be, and this is the way it's going to be? How does it work?
Well, at the smaller level, there's always human resource policies and procedures.
Yeah.
I mean, you think, we're gonna vet Rob Browne. Well, hell, I'm such a big profile. There's always a vetting process, which is not a big deal. But one thing that I think from being a former AD, I'm sure Greg Byrne has a short list. There's no way you don't think about this stuff. You have to. That's part of your job. If you're the coach of the coaches, you better know when your top coach leaves you, what direction. You look at the brand and what that brand has brought into that university and continues to do so. Alabama football, it is a machine, just like LSU football is a machine. So I'm sure Greg Byrne already knows the direction he wants to go. Now, the difficult part of that is, like we just talked about, is other people have families and lives and goals and where they want to be in 5 to 7 years or whatever. And it's not even though you think this is the most incredible opportunity in the world. Yeah, you're replacing an icon. It's not easy. I mean, you have to have someone that's pretty doggone strong-willed and good at what they do and has a resume to want to even consider taking this job. First of all, you got to deal with the media, the local media, the national media, the SEC grind. I mean, you could even tell everyone said this year, and Kevin, I'll throw this to you, it was one of Coach's best coaching jobs. And I agree with that. But that being said, I think it also took a lot out of him. I think when you have to make a decision like he did early on after the Texas game, and you put your young starting quarterback on the bench and you play as poorly as you did in that game against, I think it was USF. Football game. And I think Saban's a master plan too, because I think he knew all along. I know what I got behind him. We can beat USF with our defense. I'm going to show everybody. I'm going to give you video evidence of what we have behind them. Now shut up and let's put the young man back in the spot and let's build. And I think, it's 20-13 with 4 minutes and 19 seconds to go. Yeah. And Alabama had dominated that second half. I don't care what anybody says. They had dominated that second half. And, I think it would have been if Alabama wins that game and wins the national championship, it would have been a no-brainer. But I'm sure this was a really difficult decision for Coach.
Kevin, looking at and listening to what Matt just said, the rosters, Michigan versus Alabama. Michigan, 2 5-stars on that roster, but a lot of guys that have been there for a long time playing together. Alabama, 18 5-stars. And a lot of people have said this Alabama team really didn't have the superstars. Well, 18 5-stars and you don't have a superstar. That was kind of strange to me that they didn't do it. Kevin Steele, when he stepped down a couple of days ago, I talked to someone who talks to Kevin Steele a lot, and I think he wants to go over to Edisto Beach and kind of do his thing there. He's not very old. No. He's like 66. I mean, I love Kevin Steele. I love that. He brought the culture back, as my friend said. This is the most I don't know of a bigger Alabama fan in the world than this friend of mine. And he said he brought the culture back, but then he just said, I'm ready to check out. That was a canary in the coal mine to me that, wow, he just came back for 1 year. I figured he'd come back. But your thoughts on all that, with all that talent, and those players are in the portal, but they can get out as quickly as they got in, can't they? I think this is just a temporary kind of maybe a panic, and the fans are buying into it. I think they're foolish to do it.
Well, one thing to consider just about, the rule that the current players at Alabama have 30 days now because the head coach has left to enter the portal. Well, there are other considerations here. I know my sons went back to school. I'm looking at my calendar. They started back on January 8th.
Yeah.
You're getting to drop an ad period, the end of drop an ad periods, to get enrolled, to get admitted, to actually begin taking classes. You can't start taking classes in February. It's not the way colleges work. And as for the moment, college football players are still affiliated with the university and they are still students. and they're still required to go to class. And so there are other considerations, and that's what's going to be. It's going to make it difficult for any Alabama players that want to leave now to be able to go through spring practice somewhere else just to get enrolled and admitted to classes at another school.
Yeah,
that window, it's closing very quickly. So I don't think you're going to see a mass exodus, and that's why at first I thought, yeah, it's important for them to hire someone quickly, but maybe not so much because of the time on the calendar where we sit. But yeah, there were breadcrumbs. Kevin Steele retiring, the way Nick Saban reacted after the loss to Michigan. He's always been calmer, if you will, after losses. His rants tend to come after wins over non-conference teams that didn't go as well as he thought they should have gone, or they didn't play for 60 minutes, or they just didn't live up to the standards that he expected. He was more likely to go off then than after a loss. But the fact that when he was asked about 4th and 3, the last play, he very calmly, very patiently described the thought process, the whole situation, Michigan calling timeout, and basically getting Alabama out of its first choice for that play, which was brilliant coaching on Michigan's part. And then Alabama calling timeout. They didn't like the look on the second call. And then, of course, what happened, he was very patient about it. And then he brought up and made it a point to talk about what this team had accomplished, how far they had progressed, what it meant to him to coach that team. That was, I don't want to say a farewell address, but it certainly had me wondering. And in fact, I wrote last week after my piece after the game a couple days later said the headline I put on it was, "Did more than the sun set at the Rose Bowl?" Yeah, and so I've had feelings, more gut feelings than reporting news for some time that this was going to be it for him. And as Matt said, and Frank both, I think both alluded to, if they had won, it was a no-brainer. I thought there was no question. But it's not as much of a surprise that even though they lost, because as much as he is the face of college football, he is the elder statesman of the sport. He is not, and as big an ego as he has, and he certainly does, he's not a me guy. He was never going to have a farewell tour like Coach Krzyzewski. He was never going to agree to do something like that. He was going to go out as quietly and unobtrusively as possible, which is impossible for someone of his stature. But as much as he could, that's the way it was going to happen. So in that sense, it's not really a surprise that it came on a Wednesday afternoon, the second week of June. Yeah.
Well, here's one thing I put up here. Ole Miss doesn't start.
January, not June.
Yeah, exactly. No, Ole Miss doesn't start classes until January 24th. I threw that out there because we got a lot of guys in our hunting club, and the kids go to Ole Miss, and I think that's why they chose Ole Miss, because they get to duck hunt. The season ends January 31st. They get to be out a long time and get to hunt a lot, but that also could be enticing if any Alabama players are looking to go someplace and enroll quickly. It is a short trip to Oxford, Mississippi, and far be it from Lane Kiffin to call out and reach out to any of those guys. But I mean, I'm just saying that. But Kevin,
let me do a public service announcement real quick.
Yeah,
my daughter in LSU doesn't start till Monday, so if anybody's out there just kind of putting their ducks in a row, just letting you know you still got time to come down to the Bayou. And by the way, Nick Saban wasn't going to do a retirement tour, because the rocking chair he would have gotten in Baton Rouge would have had something probably sitting in the middle of the seat for him. But that's another story.
Well, I will say this, and Kevin, you're right. Coach Krzyzewski was awesome, but I hated it. I think he even was sort of repulsed by it at the end. And remember when they lost that last game in Durham, and they didn't want to, I mean, we all remember Judd Heathcote's retirement tour at Michigan State, the giant rocking chair out there in the middle of the court at Ohio State or wherever. But I'm with you. I don't think he's a me guy, and I think he's already on to something. I mean, he doesn't do something, I'm sure, without planning. Hell, he may go back and get that long-awaited degree that he never got, and that is being a mechanical engineer, because he thinks like a mechanical engineer.
Hey,
He's
Rob,
that big of a planner.
Rob, to paraphrase the great senator from the great illustrious state of Tennessee, Fred Thompson, Nick Saban don't go to the bathroom without a plan.
Yeah, he doesn't. He doesn't. He was describing, talking about a Russian submarine captain. You're right. Yeah,
yeah. I said one of the, and these are some of my favorite moments in the business, getting to do one-on-one interviews with him in his office. And I can remember distinctly one of those. It was going to be at the noon hour, and the SID, the sports information director, asked me, "What do you want to eat for lunch?" I said, "What do you mean? What do I want to eat for lunch?" He said, "Well, Coach, this is the window of time Coach has to talk to you, and he would like to eat lunch while you're talking because he wanted to kill two birds with one stone." And of course, he didn't have to think about what he was going to eat for lunch because he ate the same damn thing every day, so he didn't have to think about what he was going to eat for lunch. So I told him I'll take a hamburger. I ordered a hamburger and fries, something like that. So
yeah,
I had lunch with Nick Saban in his office, and we talked football that day.
Is he? I mean, Matt, you're interesting insight that you gave Tyler, director of scouting. I mean, that's not an 8 to 4:30 job.
No,
I've never had a job with a salary. Honestly, I mean, I've always been, I eat what I kill. Your work hours are whenever people call you and need you. I've never had work hours. I mean, none of y'all do. I mean, Kevin's stories break in the middle of the night. And as an AD, Matt, good God, that's what happened to John Hartwell this morning. He had an emergency with some student athletes. He's just, he always lets me know. He's usually on, but it happens. Frank, somebody wants to buy a house, you're going to get them a house at 3:00 in the morning. Hey, you betcha. How you doing? My wife and I'll be there. Give us 35 minutes.
Prep hard. Third copy's yours.
Yeah. That's right. You pay, you stay at
That's
Crazy
right.
Frank's, everything. Okay.
That's right.
Matt, looking at all this that's going on, again, people don't realize 8 moves in 12 years for the Lanning family, 3 young boys. God, how many people do we know that go crazy about one move in every 10 years? And my first wife was a military brat. Every 2 years, the friends that you've made, sorry, you're gone. You're going to Fort Huachuca, Arizona. You're going to Fort Benning. You're going to Fort Amador in Panama. I mean, it's people don't appreciate it. And I'm not going to say they don't respect it, but they have no idea what that's like for the wives and the children. That's brutal.
About to be 9.
Yeah. Could be. Yeah.
Well, I have confirmed reports from good sources that Dan Lanning's in his office right now. Okay. In Eugene, Oregon. That's all I'm going to say about that. And I have really good reports on that.
Just pray Nick Huizenga's Miami Dolphin plane doesn't show up. That's all I'm telling you. You don't want to. You don't want to see it or Jim Cantori anywhere in your airspace.
No. Yeah.
That's very
right.
true. But like I'll give you my first head job. So I've been a longtime assistant for Coach Ilgeman. My wife and I decided to go to Ohio. I take the Denison University men's basketball job. As I'm packing to drive up there that day, my wife was going to stay back with the kids for a little bit. 9/11 occurred. I go up there. I'm in a hotel for the first 2 weeks. I'll never forget being on one of the first flights that they allowed to go out, to come back to see my family, when we were in the moving process. I was up there 7 months, Rob, and I was back in St. Patrick's Day coaching Rhodes women's basketball. I never thought about that. So that was, my wife gave me kind of a one-off on that one. She said, okay, wasn't what we thought it was going to be. We're going to come back to Rhodes. And I've remained here, for a cumulative total, both stops, total 33 years. I can't imagine doing this every 2 to 3 years or doing that. I mean, and the person that suffers the most is the spouse.
Sure. And the kids.
She's got to get the kids enrolled in school. Sometimes she's got to rely on her parents to help out. I'll tell you what, dealing with transport and moving companies these days, it's not easy either. Heck, it was an act of God for me to get my son's car to Eugene, Oregon from Memphis, Tennessee. I had to drive it myself. We couldn't get a transport company. This was right after COVID that hey, we're booked. It's really hard to get to Eugene, Oregon. Yeah, I know it is. I drove it.
Yeah.
So, I'm telling you, Greg Byrne's really good at what he does. He's got 2 or 3 people, and he's just going to go down that line. And until he gets the right yes, I think it'll happen rather quickly. I think it's going to happen. I think Byrne and Saban have already talked about the possible. I mean, I think Saban's that iconic that you have a conversation with him and say, "All right, Nick, you're leaving. What do you think about the next person?" I think
Matt, if Saban had input, and I am absolutely positively sure he did, it will be Dan Lanning. If he does not have input, it's going to be Lane Kiffin. Those are my 2 bets, and I put my arm in a chopping block. It's going to be one or two, and I think it's Dan Lanning because I don't think they would ever make a move without Saban having at least input in a successor. They owe that to him.
Right. I agree, Frank. But I also think there's a possibility that if, let's just say, I don't know this happened. Let's say Saban called Lanning, right? And said, "Hey, I want you to be the guy." And Dan says, "Coach, I want to be the guy one day, but now's not the right time." I don't know how that conversation goes, right? I don't know what that plays out to as well. I haven't heard that. I'm not reporting anything. I'm just saying that I would think that call would have happened if what you say is true, Frank. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Well,
I think whatever happens, it's going to happen quick.
Yes.
Yeah. I do.
I think by tomorrow we see white smoke coming out of Dreamland's smokestack.
Well, you look at this reports from Jonesboro, Arkansas. Butch Jones on the plane to Tuscaloosa. Brian Harsin in play. God no. Oh.
Hey! I saw Mike Shula on an odds board in Las Vegas. Honest to God, I did. It was like 280 to 1. You talk about hit my knees at night and holy mackerel. That would be incredible. That, but it ain't gonna happen. But I think everybody, short of Agatha and
Frank, you're breaking up. You sound like R2-D2 from Star Wars here. You there? Hey, he froze.
He froze. Frank is frozen.
He's frozen. But maybe Kevin and Matt and Frank, if you can hear us, looking at all these memes that are out there. There's the one of Brian Harsin in a crimson warm-up suit looking up at Bryant-Denny Stadium. And, I mean, the reaction of people, it's kind of funny what people are able to do. But I think Brian Harsin will stay out west. Him and Tony Barbie still, it's a fight, the worst hired in the history of Auburn athletics. But I think these coaches, y'all are putting so much truth into it, what it does to the families having to move like that. Kevin, what are you going to be looking for? We got a few minutes left to happen today. What are you going to be writing about? You put constant information out. You're great on Twitter. You think about, as I always say this about the writers, you think about what you're saying because you've written it. It's like an architect and an engineer. We got to work together to make this 100-story building function.
Well, I think we'll hear from Nick Saban, but it'll be in very select setting. I believe he's going to do I understand he's going to do a one-on-one with Reese Davis at some point today. Excuse me. And he may have a conference call with a small handful of national writers. And I think that will be it. I don't think he's going to have a press conference. I don't think, he's not going to make a big deal about this, and he's going to keep it as low key as possible, but he will have something to say. So that will be fascinating. His conversation with Reese Davis, of course, we'll all look forward to that, to hear what he has to say about why now and what's next. He may not know the answer to the what's next just yet, although he is so calculated and so meticulous, so detail-oriented, it would be a surprise if he didn't have some idea of what's next. And then you won't hear from Greg Byrne. He wasn't just putting out a PR statement when he said, "You won't hear from me until I'm introducing a coach." Right. He's going to go underground and is underground and will not emerge until they have their guy. I think it will be sooner rather than later. I would be surprised if we don't have a press conference to introduce the new coach sometime, I don't know, beginning of early next week at the latest, maybe by midweek, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at the latest, as soon as they can work out the details. Because this is not, they're not starting from scratch. Greg Browne is very accomplished and experienced at this kind of thing. And he's been planning for this for some time. I do know that. So I do remember, it just reminds me of Bill Battle, the former Alabama athletics director, who after he hired Avery Johnson as the basketball coach in Tuscaloosa, he said he told Nick Saban, look, please don't leave anytime soon. I can't go through this again, because he had gotten on a plane. He had flown all over the place. They thought they were going to hire what's the guy from Wichita at the time? Greg.
Yeah. Greg Montgomery? No.
Greg Marshall.
Greg Marshall. Yeah.
Greg Marshall.
Yes.
He was the favorite. He was the favorite in the clubhouse, and that didn't work out, and they ended up hiring Avery. But it's going to be fascinating. And look, let's just say this. Alabama will never be the same.
No.
The university or the state. What Nick and Terry did with the Nick's Kids Foundation doesn't get nearly as much publicity as the national championships, but it has had lasting impact in that community and in this state. And their legacy is secure. There will be a movement to put his name on the stadium, either Nick Saban Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium. I've heard people suggest they take Denny's name off and make it Bryant-Saban Stadium. There will be all kinds of suggestions on and ideas on ways to honor him for what he accomplished over the last 17 years, how many lives he touched in a positive way. And then we'll move on, and it'll be, look, it's harder than ever to win a national championship. It's going to be with 12 teams in the playoff. You might have to win one more game if you have to play in that first round. So it's just going to be a challenge. But now, as Frank Duffy may so colorfully demonstrated, there are celebrations going on at 15 other SEC schools, or SEC schools to be, because now Alabama is still going to be Alabama, and they are not, the next coach will not come into a broken system the way Nick Saban did. But it's Nick Saban is the GOAT for a reason. Yeah. And the next guy is going to have one of the hardest jobs ever in collegiate athletics. I go back to Gene Bartow, having known him so well, following John Wooden at UCLA. He hated the spotlight. He hated everything that went with it. It's just almost a surprise in hindsight that he took the job. He did a good job for 2 years, but it told you something about the pressure involved in following a legend, that he left UCLA to start a basketball program from scratch at UAB in Birmingham, Alabama.
Yeah, you're right. And, as far as Dr. Denny, I don't think that name will ever go away. You think about during the Depression, he kept the doors open at Alabama by bringing in so many out-of-state students that kept the school's doors from being closed. And think about Nick Saban, what he's done. 60% of the student body at Alabama is now out of state. And I've got friends that live in Tuscaloosa who they live in fear, and now their fears have been realized. I don't know what will happen, but they've said 40,000 students here, all this student housing. Nick Saban, whenever he leaves, what could happen to all this housing? I mean, it's such a boom for the economy. But Nick Saban coming to Alabama and being the coach is sort of like in Forrest Gump when Forrest said, we bought all these apples and stuff like that. It was Apple stock on the IPO. I mean, and now he was a gazillionaire. That's the greatest investment they have ever made, was bringing in Nick Saban. Matt Dean, as we close out here, now, do your sources know what Dan Lanning is eating for breakfast right now? Do we have an update on that? It's just because it's going to be crazy. Can you imagine the people in the press corps contingent in Oregon and any place where they think Nick Saban's successor is going to come from right now? It's going to be a wild few days.
I think between 8 and 8:30 Pacific time, which is about 10 to 10:30 our time.
Yeah,
I think there will be a statement from the school out west that we're talking about.
Yeah.
I think he has to address it because it's not just us talking about it. It's been since the announcement. I think I follow Brett McMurphy, if that name's correct, who's always on a list for college sports, and he was at the top of it. I mean, I think that will be. I think Frank's right. I do think that there's been contact. I can't comment on that, but I think we're going to find out where he sits on it shortly.
Yeah. And that Brett McMurphy, I saw that on Twitter last night.
Yeah.
And, you're going, he's a hell of a journalist. I mean, do you know him, Kevin?
I do. Yeah. Brett's very good at what he does. Yeah.
He is.
And his message was not like, hey, Lanning's getting a job. He's just like, he's going to be one of the first targets. I think that's kind of what he kind of said. I think.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So, Kevin, and the hardest thing to do right now, I mean, you've got so much coming at you right now. I mean, everywhere you look as a True Grit journalist, where are you going to start? Like, it's going to be the names that are going to be thrown out there. We mentioned some of them, but give me a wild card that no one's even thinking about that you think, oh, maybe that's the guy. Because there's somebody out there. I'm putting you on the spot, but that's how hard.
I hadn't really, and let me. I don't really have a name for that, Rob. And let me say this. And one of the things that resonated with me after the national championship game, when someone asked Jim Harbaugh about the NFL, and it may have been Andy Staples, and I think Harbaugh's response was something to the effect of, "Can I enjoy this?
Right?
Can I be in this moment? We just, my team just accomplished something very significant. Can we just enjoy this?" And I think we are. And look, this is the world we live in. We're so quick to think about what's next.
Yeah.
So I think my thoughts. And I wrote I wrote a piece. My newsletter. I had already written my newsletter that came out this morning. I had to obviously last night. I had to write a topper for that. Shared some personal interactions I've had with Nick Saban through the years, and then I wrote a separate column for the Birmingham Lead about what Nick Saban has accomplished and what he's meant to the state, the university, et cetera, and the game of football. So I think, while yes, everybody wants to know who's the guy, who's going to follow him, I think we should pause a little bit and just, again, reflect on what we've witnessed in this state and the sport has witnessed over the last 17 years, because we've never seen anything like it before. And it is it is highly unlikely we'll ever see anything even approaching it in the rest of our lives.
Yeah. That's what's so wild is that people look at the standard. I mean, the SEC, we just, Bryant, Dye, Spurrier, Saban. I mean, it's unbelievable. And no other conference even comes close to matching that in the modern era. All right, let's close out. Matt Dean, let them know how they can follow you. And then Kevin, you do the same. And Kevin, you did get my stuff last night. I took the picture and okay, make sure.
I'll take care of that today.
Okay. Thank you. But Matt, let them know how they can follow you, because I'm going to have y'all two together on here a lot going forward. If you'll come on talking about basketball. I mean, both of y'all are, I love I've never heard it, a hoop head. That sounds like a name for a great bar in Chapel Hill or something like that. But Matt, let them know.
Yeah, at Dino Hoops 44 on X, formerly the Twitter. If you want to follow Rhodes Athletics, rhodeslinks.com. Our basketball teams are action this weekend. Friday and Sunday, we play doubleheaders in conference now, the rest of the way out. And just one last comment on what we talked about earlier with Coach Hilgeman. We're going to try to honor him Friday night, and then his services are this weekend. And it's been tough for the family because he's been in pain the last several months and fighting some things, and just relieved he's no longer in pain. He's in a better place. And, for me, Herb Hilgeman was my Nick Saban, was my Bill Belichick professionally. Yeah. He took a chance on me. I want to share one quick story. I don't want to cut the spotlight here, but I'll never forget this. I interviewed for the job back in 91 of May, and it wasn't a basketball job I was interviewing. I was out of grad school. I had a journalism background. I had coached high school basketball when I was doing my master's as an assistant and a JV coach. And I come down to Rhodes, interview for this sports information / intramural sports job, right? So the lunch portion, I go out with a couple staff members, and Coach Hilgman's in there, and he had looked at my resume, and he had said, "Hey, I see you have coached some basketball, and you were a manager in college." I go, "Yeah, sir, Coach." And he goes, "Well, listen, if you ever want to get involved with that here, let me know." And I'm like, this man just met me, you know. I come back, and my wife said, "How did the job interview go?" And I said, "Well, look, I think I'm going to get the job." But I said, "I'm more intrigued in working with Coach Hilgman." And I was his assistant for a decade. You know, he helped me get my first head job. I came back to coach women. I was fortunate enough to win some championships and become the all-time winningest women's coach at Rhodes. And I worked for the iconic all-time winningest men's coach at Rhodes. So for me, I was his Robin, but he was my Batman, buddy.
Hell yeah. That is a great story. That's why we love having you on. Kevin?
Yeah.
Well, Matt, it's been a privilege to visit with you, spend time with you this morning, always with you, Rob, as well. I hope people will go to BirminghamLead.com. You can subscribe. That is a subscription publication. It's like a newspaper thrown into your email inbox every morning. I write usually a Monday column for that publication, but on special occasions like yesterday and today, I wrote a piece this morning about Nick Saban, of course. So you can subscribe to that, or you can also subscribe to my newsletter, Scarbo Knows, through al.com/sports. And if you subscribe to my newsletter, you'll also get everything I write for the Lead. Best way to keep up with me is on Twitter/X at Kevin Skarbinski. You know, keep up with everything that I'm involved with, including one of my favorite things, Matt, is I get to be the MC for the meetings of the Birmingham Tip-Off Club.
Wow.
And we had a great meeting back in December with 3 of the 5 starters on the Alabama 1973-74 team, who were the first all-black starting 5 in SEC history. Leon Douglas was there, Booney Russell, Ray Odoms, and Charles Cleveland's brother was there. It was T.R. Dunn couldn't make it; he had a prior commitment, but it was a very special day, and I love being part of the Birmingham Tip-Off Club and helping promote the sport of basketball in this state.
Oh, absolutely, no question. Hey, most often we see the face of Christ, and least among us. We live in the greatest country in the history of the world. This show succeeds. It's not because of one. It's because of the entire group. We got the best guests, sponsors, viewers, and listeners everywhere. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day. We're out of here. We'll see you tomorrow.